we've had in the world up to now is what you might call the free trade system. And it originates principally around the British order and some of the royal families in this world. Let's put it very generally like that, so we can start with some simple understanding. Free trade economy just means that basically you try to get the most for the least put in. And you will understand really clearly when I say that a lot of our economic order has been based on slavery, using cheap cost or slave labor and slaves to then produce goods for very high prices with maximum profit until everything comes to an end, either because we run out of resources, we can't use the slaves any more efficiently because they're all worn out, and then of course people start to realize as well what's going on and they don't approve of it. Plus they may get bored of the actual products as well and not want them anymore and get concerned about the effect on economies and on the environment. So we had a world after World War II that was still based in this system, but a slide started to happen all the way up to 1991, where suddenly the Soviet Union collapsed. This free trade system kind of also went into a free fall after that point, because the world got quite complacent. The free trade system on the surface still seemed to be working. Communism in the form that was had in the Soviet Union was now gone, and everyone got a little bit comfortable and started moving into the more moral and convenient place of being able to get luxurious and comfortable with their products and their ideas. We went into a more ideological phase of economics. But then what happened? As things progressed onwards, it became clear that not everybody was following these ideal rules, and the justice system and international law was just a little bit of a scam. As time has gone on, and with more wars in recent times, we've seen very, very obviously, particularly since we've had that strange illness, that basically nobody is following the international rules, especially not the people who say that they're here to police those rules. So suddenly, morality has taken on a very different taste, and it's quite a bitter one in most people's mouths. And the idea of international law is a little bit of a mockery, because we all know it doesn't mean much. And the message of these times is that just like nature, we need to go back to what works, rather than just what sounds good, is convenient, and that claims to follow international law and morality, but actually doesn't. And the big question is, whose morality? And if we don't use morality at all, what should we put in its place that's better? What's happening is we are really self-examining about what kind of world we want to have, because what are the alternatives if we just substitute a new economic system that's different from the free trade system that we had before? What will we get? Well, there is an alternative, but it's not really the best answer. We could move into a very protectionist age, where it's basically just every man for himself. The international law is gone. We know that the ideology sounds very nice, but it doesn't achieve much. Meanwhile, prices are going up and nobody wants to buy anything. The economy is bottoming out. It's all very well thinking, I'll look after my own home area and getting into just your local economy. That will work quite strongly in the beginning. But what happens is the problem that will come up is that there's a kind of cultural annihilation, because you don't really interact with the rest of the world anymore. And also the young people, and particularly those who have come into countries from other places, they don't have the motivation to even sponsor a lot of the things they see around them, because they don't believe in the world that they see anymore, because there is a lack of connection with the dominant politics and also the immediate society arena that they go to school in or they live in. Either people have moved from different areas just in pursuit of work, so they have a disconnection from their home, or they don't like the system they're a part of and they're there just because of the economic benefits, because they need to work and earn money. And this does not sustain even local economy over the long term. Isolationism and protectionism also can lead to an anathema that develops towards military forces. And it's not that we want military action in this world, but we still want to be able to guard our boundaries, not necessarily just through economics, but to have an awareness of outside forces in the world, so that we have a correct balance between inside and outside geographically. Otherwise, just focusing on the internal domestic situation in a country means that your economy may boom to start with small and medium-sized economies, but it will bottom out in the end, because threats from abroad start to economically knock on the door, and there will be no awareness of the link between local and global economy. So some of the formulas that are being attempted in this world around isolationism may not work as well as they have in the past. And often when we get a dominant country that tries to put its own tactics out in the world from a more protectionist standpoint, they just get called a bully and ignored, because the general climate is one of, we don't want any more immoral world orders anymore. So then, what have you got after that? If that's not going to be the dominant economic model, where do you go? Or if that's adopted as the new economic model, what will happen when it starts to fragment? Meanwhile, let's not forget, half of the world is still on the free trade system and doesn't want to let go of its hold. So what will we have? Nature uses something called a decentralized but a multipolar approach. Nature uses the one and the many. Humans tend to oscillate between the one, get very scared about the many when it goes in the opposite direction, and then tries to bring back the one when the many doesn't work. But nature is far more clever. It takes on one mechanism that runs through all living beings and that then focuses on the currency of life, which includes money. And it also then has a specialization, which means that each individual, and that includes countries or nations or political or economic groups, then have a uniqueness to them whereby they can operate themselves individually as well as being related to the whole. Look at the leaves on a tree. You would never say, if I just showed you a leaf, that's the tree. But you know it's of the tree. So there's a link, even though it's just a leaf. But humans tend to go, this is Tanzania, or this is New Zealand. And then there's the rest of the world. Or they tend to go the other way round and go, there's the world, and I may be from Tanzania or New Zealand, but that doesn't really matter. The other approach that is coming in is communism, which has an economic set of possibilities attached to it. Do we want communism? I leave you to decide. Communism is a very strong possibility because we still have currents in our society that believe that it's all rich people's fault, that if you have success, it's because there is a prestige or a privilege aspect to your success. And also there are some people who think that money is just downright bad. This is where religion can get involved. And actually, believe it or not, when you have communism and its economic equivalent in a society, it's actually a response to a very religious sentiment, because deeper down there's a wish to reject some type of privilege which is taken on with an idea of superiority or inferiority. The moral is brought back into the whole equation, which is actually a religious issue. Communism is very likely because with the advent of AI, so many people are going to lose their jobs, probably 4 out of 5 at least. We're going to have to give people money just to get up in the morning because they will have no income. And then there will be a lot of narratives about how everybody needs to be treated equally, which can cross over with ideas about socialism and communism. But this could be very dangerous, as we all know. There is, unfortunately, a history on our planet of not a very good track record of human dignity that goes with these types of political and economic orders. And so, if we have a collectivist approach to economics in the future, this could not be a very good substitute for the free trade model either, just like protectionism also has its problems. Economics lesson is over, okay? So where do we go from here? How do we look at this, and how do we angle ourselves in terms of the purification? Because nature is doing something else. It's bringing in a multipolarity through all of these different things that I have just mentioned, all 3 models. And nature always has some centralization and some oneness that runs through all of our human actions. It always has the multiplicity. It always has the boundaries and the guarding of those boundaries. It always has specificity in the individual and the unique case. And it always has a mechanism which treats each and every living being equally, but according to its precise needs. We are developing a new economic model on the planet, and nature is forcing that on us. Just about everybody now has seen through the climate scam. Nevertheless, we still have a very serious issue about environmental change. We are getting very strange weather conditions which are affecting food autonomy. We are also seeing peaks of both heat and cold in different parts of the planet. The exposure and the outing of these hidden forces means that economically we are going to need to bring in some features which take into account no longer polluting the planet and more consciously providing goods and services. But that needs to be without the dubious ingredient of certain people pushing solutions who may have their own selfish interests and a more globalist type of agenda at heart. Nature always pushes the formula where all living beings are taken care of. So we will need to develop a model where everyone receives what they need if they have lost their job, but that shouldn't be in return for compliance to a moral order which is actually immoral and only some people have to answer to, and others don't. Nature always has a oneness, and we would hope that our international law would also reflect that. I think we are a long way away from having any type of unified set of international laws on this planet, which everyone keeps, which are for the positive benefit of humanity. Not only is it hard to agree on those things, but it is impossible to police that if nobody keeps it. And let's face it, most people have a problem following rules, whether they're good ones or not. So where will the rules come from? There won't be any. Actually, the only rules that nature has are its own rules which turn up in each living being internally. And that's what we're going back to, because the release of external rules is actually speeding that in the chaos and the confusion. So even though you will find that economic systems will break down because people start to follow themselves more, in their economic actions and their decisions, they will actually start answering to nature's principles more deeply, because you will see more and more people unable to comply with any of the economic regulations and the financial compliance, and more willingness also in some quarters to break those rules and disregard them because they're either ridiculous, they can't be kept, or that no one simply believes in them. Look at what's happening in the world right now. There are even really high up people who are saying this should happen, that should happen, and they have been deemed irrelevant as world leaders, and nobody listens to them, and somebody else just does something else. There is a positive aspect to this, as well as a negative one. At the deepest level, nature's world order is taking over, which means that there are only nature's rules which are internal to each living being. It does, however, mean that we are going to have a much more unstable world economically, and this is something that you should bear in mind when making long-term decisions about your money. It does mean that the world could become temporarily more violent as we get some people who attempt to try the old model and take over and put themselves on the top and be king of the world. It just won't wash anymore, and we will move externally to more of a multipolar world where we have lots of decentralized centers that answer to themselves with an internal rule mechanism running through that actually comes from nature. It's a bit like lots of cars driving everywhere without any lines on the road or any lanes. They learn their own momentum, but occasionally there's a spectacular crash and everybody collides. This is what we're likely to see in the short term. But this is while we are getting hold on a new signal from where the rules actually really come from, which is inside. Nuclear power could actually be our savior, not because we need to use it. That's a debate that we can leave for people who are in economics and in physics and the sources of power and the research attached to that. But remember that when more than one power has nuclear weapons, it's less likely that even the bullies will go too far. Because when things get really crazy, there's always the danger that someone might press a button. So in a strange way, even though you may not agree with nuclear power, while we still have nuclear weapons in the world, short term, it may actually stop war from escalating. It just remains to be seen whether people start to listen more closely to what's going on inside them and their immediate local environment, because then out of that we are likely to get the demand for nuclear power and nuclear weapons to be brought more in line with safety and efficiency, and maybe see in the future a more peaceful deployment of that scientific research in a different way that's less harmful potentially for humanity. So we live in a very interesting moment, which shows us that actually nature is in control. The reason why we're seeing what we're seeing is because the plug has been pulled on one human structure with a small minority at the top who engage in this free trade slavery model that just bottoms out in the end and sees everything descend into poverty and even more slavery in a new form. This world is being regulated by a different force now. And in these times, planet Earth is moving into a very different phase of natural energies where it is harder for what is not following nature's principles to get away for too long with too much. And you will see more and more fringe, extreme activity initially, which blows up big in sound and fury, but then dies away. And people power is the dominant form of economics in terms of models that we're going to see in the future. Just think about it. If we have 80% of our workforces in their houses on some type of communist type of universal credit, yes, some people will slide into apathy and they will need more technology to keep people asleep. It is true that many people will succumb to that and give up, at least in the beginning. But also, when you decommission people from purpose and alongside nature signaling is getting stronger inside each individual, more time on our hands is actually going to mean a demand for better standards. There will be more space for dreaming and creativity, but less resources to do it. Human beings will become more demanding, more difficult to actually confine. And our economic models, as much as they may try, they cannot confine us in those circumstances, because the reason why that system had to be implemented in the first place was because the economic system collapsed. There has been a massive overestimation of the psychological effect of the emperor's new clothes in recent times. Everybody knows that the economic system has been bottoming out for a long time, so any new type of system is not likely to be taken very seriously, except for having to need to do it because you may not have work. That can lead to a very uncomfortable situation for anyone who has a negative agenda. There are simply not enough resources to control the populations. And even with digital systems of surveillance, human ingenuity is so powerful, and nature's voice inside each individual is becoming so strong to the tune of, I've seen all this media crap before. I know it's propaganda. I know it's BS. I know what happened during the 2020s and how none of it was quite what it seemed. I've heard all the stuff going on in Davos. I know exactly what that is, even if I don't understand all of the really small economic details. There has been a massive oversight. And when this occurs, the wind of change starts to blow. People start to dream up new local economies, sometimes in resistance and needs must, because that's human nature, but also personal and universal instructions switch on that are ready for these times. and new systems of economy come forward which are based on exactly what people want to see. There's a thirst for justice, not woke ideology. There is a thirst for nature and proper food, not insect flour and green points attached to your credit card. There is a thirst for a proper future for our children. And they will live during times where it will not be anymore about training for a certain career or getting into an education pathway. It's going to be about their adaptivity, how quickly and easily they can grasp inside their own personal instructions and translate them out into the world. And what powers that in economic systems? The values that are given to you by your loved ones and your families, particularly during times where you have difficulty and less economic input from your external power structures. It's not the doomsday scenario that we've been told. That's being given to us to keep us under control. There are the seeds here of a very quiet system change from the inside out, where the people themselves become the new economy, and people's brightness, their ability to absorb pure love and to tap into nature's biointelligence is going to be the new value of our times. With or without the digital system, with or without communism, protectionism, and free trade economy, we are moving into a new definition of economic autonomy, which laces in with the one and the many.